So here we are. This is lecture 4 in the home run course. And as I mentioned just before we started recording, some of our students can't be here for very good reasons. Dan Walkna has a meeting with his boss, which is never a good idea to skip. And Paula and Jake and their 3 little kids are headquartered in Tampa, Florida at the moment, and they had to run to escape Hurricane Ian, I think it's called. It's been devastating. And so, you know, like everyone else, I hope they're safe and are well. Just a couple of things. We did have a bonus lecture this Saturday. I think you all know that. Where we were going to, do a presentation on behalf of Jake and Paula. We were going to invite some potential investors, and I wanted everybody here in this class and a few other people to join in and look at how we structure deals and how we present them and how hopefully we can be successful in acquiring investor capital. But that was supposed to happen this Saturday, but because of the hurricane, it's been postponed. So don't try and tune in on Saturday. There's no lecture, unfortunately, and we'll reschedule it till later. You all know that I actually kind of like investors, but I don't really like partners. And the difference between an investor and a partner, you've heard me say it before. An investor wants a return on investment and to be updated on the project 2 or 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year. A partner wants, to have a say in decision making. And that tends to slow things down. And there's an old expression in our business, and not just in the real estate industry, but tech industry and elsewhere, that there's still 2 chairs in heaven waiting for the first 2 partners to get there and still like each other. So investors are often welcome into projects, but partners maybe not so much. And when you do have a partner, what I preach, and you'll hear me say it time and time again, is when you do have a partner, try and design the partnership as a non-partnership partnership model. And again,
a silent partner.
Well, no, silent partners are kind of investors. I mean something a little different, Bob. And what I mean by that is, let's say, Bob, you and I were partners in something. Say we were building, you remember those 6 plexes that Aaron Markle and Brad Cartier are building? They're beautiful. And
Right.
they plan to build, I think right now, 7 of them in this year and next year. And they have the land to do it, and they have the financing to do it, or they'll get it. And they finished or almost finished their first one. They'll build 6 more. What I wanted Brad and Aaron to do, and what I would want you and me to do, is, let's say, Bob, you and I did 7 of them together. What I would want to do is we'd be 50-50 partners, perhaps all the way through. You'd have a say in it, I'd have a say in it. But at the end of the day, maybe we would sell 3. And remember, that's your cash engine. So you sell 3, you hopefully make some money on it, and you've got a little bit of cash flow, right? You're turning your money over. That's called fast money. And then we're left with 4. And then, so this is where the non-partnership partnership comes in. Out of those 4, Bob, you decide you'll take these 2, and I decide I'll take these 2. And so you own it 100%, those 2 100% not you, and I own 2 of them 100% me. And if Bob decides to run off with a young woman to Costa Rica and drink rum, and I'm happily married to my wife and I'm staying here, maybe he sells his 2. And I keep mine and give them to my kids, because Bob's a reckless no good. Just kidding, of course, Bob.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is that then there's no possibility of having a falling out with your partner. With investors, it's often very similar kind of structure. Anyway, that was a Saturday class that is now postponed. Now, having said that, if you don't mind, just note down in your calendars, class number 5 is Wednesday, October 12th, again from 11 till 1 Eastern time, so 8 till 10 Pacific. So October 12th, 11 to 1, and I'll send out the Zoom link, a couple of days before we do that class. And that class is really crucial, I think. Before we started the home run course, I asked the folks here whether they wanted to do an entire lecture on financing real estate. And I think everybody said, absolutely. And so I was hoping to do the Saturday bonus thing, which where you see the investment structure and how we present it and all the other good stuff. Well, maybe that won't happen. But on October 12th, I'll do an entire 2 hours on how to finance real estate, all kinds, land development, property development, doesn't matter. I'll go through a number of case studies, and I think that'll be helpful. Let's see. I have scheduled one-on-ones with some of the class in October, because October's kind of, we're at the midpoint now. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure, Karina, you and Dave, maybe separately, Michael, Bob, and Dan, and everybody else, we should schedule something in October. So reach out to me. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend 2 hours together analyzing your case study, seeing how we can improve it, if we can, see where you're struggling, what are the opportunities. Alex, for example, I'm expecting some sketching from you on the ideas that your brother has shared with me and you have shared with me. So I'd like you to do as much as possible on your case study, but I'll try and give you a little bit of feedback, and hopefully it'll be useful feedback. And then in November, as we get closer to the end of this, in class number 8, actually, which will be the last class, you guys are going to be presenting. And so I can, finally, you'll have heard enough of me, and I'll get to hear about 20 minutes from each of you. And you remember how to present a case study, right? Here's what we're thinking of doing. Here's the highest and best use. Here's how we're organizing things, and then usually what you do in a case study is you say, well, and here's some of the issues that or problems that we're facing. And then you stop and you let the class discuss those and get some ideas from the class as to how they might solve a particular problem that you're facing. And then you have a solution module where after they had a few minutes to talk about what they might do in the same circumstances, you say, well, this is what we did, or this is what we plan to do. So that's kind of a typical case study. All right, so I think that's about it. Canadian Thanksgiving is coming up in about 10. Yes, Karina.
I just have a question for you on that. So I have a project, and Dave has his own project too.
Yep.
They're both land development projects.
Yep.
Do we meet with you together? Like, should we schedule a one call each, or?
No, I think you do one each. Okay. If you have one joint project, obviously we're going to do it together. I mean, Dave is welcome to join your call, and you're welcome to join Dave's call, but there will be 2 calls.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. I mean, I want to make sure that you get as much of out of this class as possible, and as much out of the professor as possible too. All right. So yeah, separately, but you can join together. Alex, if you and Daniel have 2 different projects you want to work on, you can. And I think, Bob, you and Dan have different projects to work on, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so,
we're 2 separate.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, you could be on, if Dan wants, you could be on Dan's call, and Dan could be on your call if you want. I'm good with that. But we have to do that in October, because you're going to be presenting your case studies in November. And of course, all of these classes are recorded, so your presentations will be recorded, and you'll get that link. And so if you want, you can use that, to push your projects further down the pipeline as and when you get liftoff. All right, so that's enough of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that too. All right, did I cover everything? Yeah, so Canadian Thanksgiving is coming up in another 10 days. And I was actually thinking, what do I have to be thankful for this year? And there's quite a lot. I had 2 more little grandchildren born this year, beautiful little girls. I mean, absolutely adorable. I really love the work that I get to do with folks like you and others that I coach and mentor and teach. And I got a wife, as I mentioned earlier, that I adore. So there's a lot to be thankful for. And I'm thinking also that, we live in a country in Canada, in my case anyway, that is largely peaceful. And in my opinion, there's no statistics that I could back it up with, but in my experience, if you meet 20 Canadians, 19 of them will be really great people. And maybe in the States it might be a little lower, but certainly in my experience, Canadians tend to be nice. And if 2 Canadians argue In my experience, the worst that might happen is they exchange harsh language. In the States, and I've spent a lot of time in the States, lived in California for many years. When two Americans argue, they pull out pistols and start blasting away. It's a little bit of a different, it's a different society. It's a wonderful country in many ways, but I have clients in Texas. They go to the shopping mall with pistols, strapped to their belts. It's an open carry state, so it's just like the Wild West that you see on television, where you can go through a shopping mall with two six, I don't know if they're 6-shooters, and probably Glocks or something like that with 20 rounds, but you can, it's a different culture. But that does have some bearing on a couple of things. In real estate terms, if you are renting, if you had 20 apartments to rent, no matter how careful you are, it's very likely that one out of 20, and again, that's just an experience thing saying, I could be wrong, but in my experience, 1 out of 20 tenants are terrible, no matter how careful you are. And what I tell people who are getting into this business or who are already on the business, don't punish the other 19 great tenants because you got one bad one. Just deal with it. Take the emotion out of it. It's horrible. Take you forever, at least in Ontario, take you forever to get them out, but just go through the process, get them out, fix the place, and move on. All right. Exactly, Karina. Sometimes they look good on paper, but they're terrible tenants. But and if you can't hack that, then you can't be in this business, at least not on the residential side of the business. All right. So I don't lose my temper. I just go, oh, okay, I got one, and I deal with it, and I'm pretty good at that. I guess that's enough of that. All right, so today what I really wanted to go through again for you all, and I'll start sharing my screen here, and again, just stop me at any time. Let's see, I hope I'm showing the right screen. Daniel, can you see my screen okay? Thank you. So what I wanted to do, and in fact, I really wanted to start this. Oops, I gotta make that smaller. I really wanted to start this course with it says lecture 3. It's actually lecture 4. How interim income lifts internal rate of return. And when you're doing some kind of development, Brad and Aaron Markle, for example, Brad Cartier and Aaron Markle, when they're looking for a site, they're often looking for a site that already has some kind of building on it. Maybe it has a duplex on it or an old 5-plex, which is at the or nearing the end of its economic life, but it has some income. Because in a place like Ottawa, it can take a couple of years to work through your site plan agreement. And so it's really helpful to have some interim income in the first year or two while you're waiting to develop it. In a small town like a city like Rockland, it might take a year. In Ottawa, it might take 2 years. But whether it's a year or 2 years or even longer, having some income, even if it's not very much, can really make a difference between your internal rate of return. You'll see I'm going to hammer that home today. And again, stop me anytime you want. I might miss the chat box, Karina, but if I do, you can just sort of chirp in and say, hey, I got a question, or anybody else, of course. So I want to show you, this is really difficult, and this is a case study, okay? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the situation, and then I do want you guys, all of you, we don't have very many on the class today because of some absences. I want you to unmute yourself, and I want you guys to think about what you would do, all right? I want to hear from you today, so it's not just 2 hours of me. All right, so this is a really nice school that a client of mine bought, and it's kind of, I think Smith Falls is here, Merrickville, these are small towns. Smith Falls is here, Merrickville is here, and the school is kind of midway between them. So it's probably 8 minutes drive to Smith Falls and about 8 minutes to Merrickville. And these are small towns, could be anywhere. It could be Montana that we're talking about, but in this case, it's Ontario. So a client of mine bought this school, which has been abandoned by the local school board. It was a public school. You can see that here. And just a few more pictures to orient you. It has an asphalt parking lot, but you can see it's kind of breaking up. But still, it's a lot easier to fix an existing asphalt parking lot than to build one from scratch. You might resurface it, or you might add some more gravel and resurface it, but it's a lot less expensive to do that. So it's a 17,000 square foot building. in good condition on a 9-acre site. So lots of empty space. You can see this is pictures I took of the 9 acres in the back. It's just a large farm field in effect. This is the owner now. His name is Sabby, and Sabby bought this. He's a constructor, and I think he really bought it kind of on a, I don't really want to call it on a whim, but it's close to that. And his realtor, I think, sold him on this. Okay, he said, well, this is really an exciting opportunity. And Sabby bought it, and he's a smart businessman, but he bought it without doing a lot of due diligence. In fact, probably not. Okay, which is something I wouldn't want you to do. But anyway, you can see the inside of this building. It's nice, it's dry, the roof's in good shape. And these are pictures again I took. And it has all of these classrooms. You can see them, they're in good shape. Now it has electric baseboard, which in Ontario is quite expensive, but it has electric baseboard heating, and you can see the classrooms as we go. Lots of power, so plenty of electrical, lots of bathrooms. This is one of the architect here, Patrick Rutherford, flushing the toilet with his foot for one reason or another. And you notice up here in the middle of the screen, there is a large gym. I mean, not large like a high school gym large, but large space, if you will, for little kids, right? So there you go. So when Sabby calls me up as a coach, and he said, hey, I just bought a 17,000 square foot school on 9 acres. I paid $50,000 over asking. What the heck do I do with it? And I said, well, what the heck do you do with it, Sabby? And he said, well, the realtor who sold it to me says, maybe we could redevelop the school for residential use for elders 55 plus. When he mentioned elders to me, I wasn't keen on that. Okay, I wasn't keen on that because I'm sure you all know that when you're taking care of older people, and 55 is not that old, given that I'm 70, it's not that old. And for some of you, it might be closer than you think. Maybe not you, Karina, but some of us anyway. So taking care of elders, whether they're 55 up or 65 up or 75, 85, 95 up, requires a tremendous duty of care. If I rented an apartment to you, Daniel, and to you, Dave, I wouldn't worry about you. If you get drunk and fall down the stairs and kill yourself, well, that happens. But if an elder falls down the stairs, they look at the operator, the owner, the property manager. You can be in real trouble. And of course, the pandemic showed tremendous weaknesses in our elder care system. So I wasn't really that keen on the idea. And I was even less keen on it when I talked to Tracy Zander, a local planner, and she said, well, a full rezoning and official plan amendment might be required because, believe it or not, even though the zoning is institutional, the official plan, which controls the zoning, the official plan states that this is agricultural land. So to build residential, 25 units, for example, in a 17,000 square foot building, on agricultural land requires an official plan amendment and a rezoning. And in Ontario, they treat agricultural land as if it was Mother Teresa, right? They don't, it's not easy to rezone. It can happen, it does happen, but it's not easy to do. It's very expensive. How long would it take? A long time. How much would it cost? A lot of studies. What are chances of spending all of that money and getting refused? I would say quite high. And even if it's approved, how much does it cost to take a school and turn it into 25 apartments? And is there a market for that? You got to remember, this is a 17,000 square foot building, which buses would travel to with little kids, 8 or 9 minutes from Smith Falls or Merrickville. That's not too bad. But will elders want to be in the middle of nowhere? Maybe, but maybe not. And I already said, there's a much higher duty of care anytime you have any elderly tenants. All right, I have one elderly tenant well into his 80s, and I constantly check on him to make sure he's okay. I mean, it's just I have a triplex and he's got one of my units, but I remind myself every few months, just because he's 86 or 87, and you've got to be careful. And then there's virtually 7 acres of vacant land in the back. What would you do with it? Here's the floor plan. This is the main entrance here. Here was the principal's office here. Principal has, I guess, right next to his or her office, a small bathroom, a main office, and then additional space here. Then there are a bunch of classrooms you can see here. The gym I mentioned earlier, the library, more classrooms, and then the kindergarten here at the back. So this is, if you can see my cursor moving, Karina, give me the thumbs up. You can see my cursor. Thank you. So this is the front of the building, and this is the back. And something I did like about the parking lot in the front is it had two ingresses, egresses. So it's kind of got a U in front, and that's often very good for traffic in and out. So I liked a lot of things about it. But when I did some analysis of I'm glad somebody found this funny. When I did an analysis of Sabby's plan with his realtor, Paul, I considered it a failure, right? So I did some spreadsheet work for them as a coach and mentor, and you know, a failure is something we don't want to see. Failure. If we think it's going to fail, don't do it. So anyway, let's look at it. So the cost of purchasing was $650,000, land transfer tax just under 10, some legal costs. Total was about $662,000 to buy a 17,000 square foot building on 9 acres, and it's on rural services, right? You're in the middle of nowhere. There's no pipe services, so it's got a septic system and a well. All right. And you'll notice I have a lot of links in these slides. If you know what I am doing, if you've been following me closely, I put this recording on YouTube, and then underneath in the description, if you hit show more, it'll show all these links. So you don't have to worry about it. You can get these spreadsheets, and you should do that. And if you haven't done it so far, you can go back to all the YouTube videos that we've done so far and look in the description. Oh, there's 3 spreadsheets there. Those are useful for you to have as models of what we're doing together. So I went with a pretty high rent. You know, when you're taking care of elders, you know, there's some extra services you provide, and typically in this area of Eastern Ontario, you know, elders are paying $3,500 to $6,000 or $7,000 or even $8,000 a month for what isn't very much. So they pay a lot of money. So I went high. I didn't want to torpedo Sabby's idea and Paul's idea without, you know, giving it a fair shot. So that would generate quite a bit of revenues, almost well, $58,400 a month, over $700,000 a year. But the OPEX, the operating expenses, instead of being sort of typically 34%, again, in my experience, it's nearly half of your revenues go out the window when you're dealing with elders. So I went 48%. So that's pretty high. And you have to have a supervisor on site, you have to have administration, and you will have some extra nursing costs. You do have, again, that duty of care is huge. So there's an allowance there for that again. So your net operating income would be about $250,000. And it might be a bit better than that. It might be a little less than that, but it's probably about right. Now, the next line you never see in spreadsheets, okay, guys? It's the probability of success. All right. And I want you to understand that if you think a project has only a 2 in 3 chance of success, you know, 65% or 66%, then you've got to take the net operating income and multiply it by the probability of success. Because
Bruce, when you say, if I can chirp in here, when you say probability of success, do you mean by the rezoning?
yes,
Or you mean the overall financial success?
no, I think the financials are probably, you can do that with allowances and contingencies, et cetera, Bob. No, that's exactly right. I think I put 65% chance of success, but what I really think I should have put here was like 5 or 10% chance of success. If I put 10% chance of success, the expected value of the net operating income would be almost nothing. And then Sabby and Paul would accuse me of tanking their project, you know, by being arbitrary. But I actually do think I've done this. I've rezoned agricultural land. It's very difficult to do in Ontario. Very difficult. In Alberta, they got so much of it. It's easy. Nothing's easy, but it's easier. In Ontario, you're in for a long, long haul and a lot of opposition. But I put 65% here, Bob. So you get 162,000 of expected value of net operating income. And the fair market value cap rate these cap rates are going up. Like every time they raise the interest rate in the United States and in Canada and Mexico, United Kingdom, the EU, these cap rates are going up, which means the value of your projects are going down. Okay, we've done enough of that. You should know that. So if you take $162,000 and you divide it by 6%, you get a fair market value. Maybe I didn't do this right, but anyway, I got a fair market value of $4.1 million, and then I got a probability of approval. And I think this is where the 65% actually was used, not up here. So I got a value at the end of 2.7 million. I might not have done this exactly right, but you sort of get the drift of where I'm going. And then I did a cash flow analysis. All right. And so savvy, the negative sign means cash out of your jeans. All right. Cash out of your jeans. The red ink, it means that Savvy put $661,975. He paid cash for this building. And so at time zero, he spent this amount of money. And then I put in $95,000 worth of planning costs and fees, and taking 10 years or 9 years to get this approved. Now you'd say that's ridiculous. It won't take 9 years. Yes, it might. So you got red ink going all the way through here until finally you end up with some positive cash flow from the value of this building, maybe 10 years from now. Oh, sorry. So that gives you an internal rate of return, which is negative. Now, how long, Dave, how long does it take to double your money at minus 17.5% per year?
A really long time.
A really long time, like infinite time, and then some more. You know, his cap rate, I think, is going to end up around 3.8%. All right. So I'm not, again, I'm not 100% sure this is done exactly right, but you're getting the gist of it. I'm telling you, this, in my opinion, would fail. So I wanted to go over one more time with all of you why the internal rate of return is so important. And I'm going to show you an example of it, so that I want to drive home that I want you as expert real estate developers to understand it's not just cap rates. It's you have to know how to calculate internal rates of return. And I want to see that, I hope, in your projects next in November. There is no perfect measure of financial success of a project. Cap rates measure cash on cash returns, and they're very useful. Internal rates of return measure those cash on cash returns and real estate appreciation and mortgage pay down. So it's probably a better measure. So I called it here in my slide deck the least worst measure of financial success, but there is no perfect measure. Okay, there is none. And I think later on in my slides, I will tell you that most projects, and probably all projects, are green lighted based on faith, that we have faith that things will work out. So yes, you want to do the analysis. That's, you know, you get your head into the game, you do the analysis. But you also have to follow your heart, which is your passion, and you have to follow your gut instincts. So real estate, unfortunately, like so many things in life, it is not just black and white. You know, if it was, I guess we'd all be millionaires, you know? Anyway, so I put in on the slide here, what is an internal rate of return? And I'll just explain it in principles. So day one, you spend $600,000 or $700,000. That's money out of your jeans. That's going out. And then hopefully, unlike this project, you don't have to wait 5 or 10 years to get any income. So maybe year 1 or 2, 3, whatever, you're getting some money in. So you've got money out and you've got some money in. And then maybe at the end of 10 years, you sold the project. And again, you get more money in. The internal rate of return says, what do you have to discount future cash flows by in order to exactly equal your investment? And what that means is that the higher the discount rate, it means that basically the greater your returns are. Okay, and you'll see it a little bit more clearly when I actually walk through a spreadsheet. And when Mike Eisner who was the former president and CEO of Disney, was applying for an NHL expansion franchise, which at that time was called the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. A lot of people in the NHL Board of Governors, including yours truly, were concerned that Disney would spend stupidly on players. You know, instead of paying a player $2 or $3 million, maybe Disney, because they had more resources than many of the owners, including yours truly, could outbid you could double that salary. And Mike said to me and to the other members of the board on the committee that Disney targets internal rates of return of 22 to 24% on every single project that they do, and that they have very, very strong financial discipline. And so what I would like you to do is, if you have a project in November that you're presenting and your internal rate of return is, say, 6% or 8% or even 10%, that's probably too low. A cap rate of 6 or 8% would be great. 10% would be fantastic, but that's just measuring cash flow. What about real estate appreciation? What about mortgage pay down? That you're missing out on, or at least you don't know until you do the internal rate of return. So I would like you to target for your own projects 22 to 24%. And I could tell you, as entrepreneurs, we can often do even better than 30 or 40%. All right. So an internal rate of return of 6, 8, or 10% would be not great. And 22, if it's okay for Disney, it's okay for you and me. All right, enough of that. So again, cap rates only measure cash flow, and IRR measures cash flow, mortgage pay down, and appreciation of real estate. All right, so I wrote this morning. Steph Curry is rich, but the man who signs his paycheck is wealthy. Chris Rock said that. He's pretty funny. And then I've got a couple of my own sayings here. Wealth is all about control over a factor of production. And real estate investing gives you that, since, by definition, once you own a location, no one else can. So only one person can own an NHL franchise in LA or Ottawa. And that's a franchise. But think about it. When Bob builds, Madawaska Shores Phase 3, no one else can build there. Only Bob can build there. So in a way, Bob has a franchise. And real estate is a business model for dummies like me. It really is. It gives you a franchise. It gives you the right to exploit that franchise, and no one else can. It automatically conveys on you and on me control over a factor of production. It's very important. That's why real estate is a hell of a lot better, in my opinion, than owning a stock. You don't control any part of the Disney company's stock. It goes up, it goes down. But if you own a piece of real estate, you control that. You personally do. That's huge. And cash flow makes you rich. Your internal rate of return makes you wealthy. I said that. But that's really just saying what Chris Rock said, but just a little bit differently. And then at the bottom, you can see a couple more by me. Investors beat savers every time. Savers put their money into the bank and they get 1.7% today. Savers put their money into a mutual fund, and if they're doing okay, maybe they get 3 or 4, 5, even 6, 7, 8%, which is 8% would be terrific, I think, for a mutual fund. Mine don't perform that well. But they certainly don't get 22%. Look at the top left corner of my screen, guys. If you put in $100,000 into something that produces an internal rate of return, which is 22.5%, you'll see that number in a moment where it comes from. In 10 years, you have 750 grand. If you put it into the NHL pension fund like I did, that 100,000 in 30 years became maybe 140,000. You following me? It went in 30 years from 100,000 to 140,000. If I put it into a piece of real estate that had an internal rate of return of 22.5, it becomes 750 grand. Okay, you guys don't have to know which is better. All right, there you go. All right, so we're going to just keep going on this case study, and you'll see where those numbers come from in a moment. So I asked Savvy to send me the zoning, and so remember, the zoning is institutional, but the official plan says agriculture, and it's the official plan that controls, not the zoning. Zoning has to be compliant with the official plan, not the other way around. And in cities in the States, they might call it a master plan instead of an official plan. It doesn't matter, same concept. The master plan is the control document. Zoning has to be in conformity with that. So the zoning here is institutional, and it allows a school, a church, a museum, a nursing home, a home for the aged, and a few other things. All right, so there's some uses there. But one of the things that occurred to me, and this won't surprise any of you because you've heard me, I'm a broken record on the subject. I said to Sabby as I walked through it, I said, oh my gosh, this building, you could turn this building into a bunch of workshops for gigpreneurs, like I did with my barn dominium, and it wouldn't cost you very much to do that. In fact, people who if you remember how nice those classrooms were, imagine you put a divider down the middle, you got 2 workshops. People who use workshops, they don't need fancy stuff. They just want a place where they can do their gig thing. And when so you can see these are on the right hand side. I just took the floor plan and I started to write down what you could rent each of these for. And you don't have to squint at it, Karina, I'll get to it in a moment. But I said, oh my God, Savvy and Paul and Patrick, who were with me that day when we went, I said, you could turn this into unbelievable workshops. And I also said, look, I don't know if you guys, it might be too small on your screen, but if you can look at the right-hand side, this part of the building would be very easy to turn into a small 1-bedroom apartment. This is the main office that the principal used to use. That can be a bedroom. This could be a living room, dining room. There's a plumbing already here. That can be a micro kitchen here. And that could be, it already is a bathroom, just add a shower. I said, Sabby, you know, you're a constructor. You could turn this into a 1-bedroom apartment in a flash for very little money. And you'd have, you know, a bunch of workshops here that you could rent out. Oh my God, it was like I threw a bomb under his seat. He absolutely did not like the idea, and his realtor was very critical. No, we want to do residential. We want to do, you know, home for the aged, nursing home. We want to do 55 plus. I said, I probably won't help you do that. First of all, at 70, if it takes 9 or 10 years, you know, that's a long time, right? I mean, if I was Dave's age or Daniel's age, maybe I might take it on. But at 70, I said, I won't help you do it. And I don't think you will be able to do it. I said, why don't you like the idea? And they said, well, it's not allowed in the zoning. I said, I beg to differ. School is allowed in the zoning. And a lot of these workshop people, like, you know, one of my workshops that in one of my buildings is rented to a very nice man by the name of Dave Lewis. And Dave makes cigar box guitars. I think I may have mentioned them on the course already. Beautiful guitars out of cigar boxes, believe it or not. And they play beautifully. And part of his rent is to have a concert once a year for the community up there. And guess what he does? He brings in apprentices and teaches them how to make them. So I said, to me, the zoning allows school, so we'll rent it as a school, and he'll teach people how to make cigar box guitars. I said, I got more ways to skin a cat than anybody else, but they really didn't like my idea. Now let me show you some of the other pictures here. So as we wandered around the school, I noticed there was significant damage. You know, one of the reasons why Patrick didn't want to flush the toilet is that there had been teenage vandals who had busted the window, got in here, and you know, teenagers, probably mostly boys, but maybe some boys and girls, they can really make a mess in so many ways. And they did that here in school. And I said to Savvy, you spent almost $700,000. If you had bought a $700,000 car, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I'm not a car guy, but you know, I guess you could buy a Lamborghini. Anybody a car guy on this call? Dave, are you?
Oh yeah, I get a Bugatti.
Okay, and would it cost $700,000?
If you get 2 of them.
Okay, well, what would? But there are cars that cost 700 grand, right?
Oh yeah, there are.
All right, let's say you bought two Bugattis for $700,000, and my five teenagers, Dave, wanted to drive them around on a Friday night, drinking and driving, or smoking weed and driving, or doing all of that. How would you feel about it? You
I'd
have to-
lose it. I would lose it.
Yeah, you would probably not agree.
Yeah.
So here's what I find absolutely extraordinary in our business, that people spend more time grooming their dogs and walking their dogs than they do caring for their $700,000 Bugatti or Lamborghini or building. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me at all. So I said, Sabby, if I owned this building, I would have converted, the day I owned it, I would have converted that principal's office into a superintendent's, site supervisor, place immediately. And he said, oh, well, I'm not sure if we get a building permit for residential, it's not a lot. I said, that isn't what I'm getting at. And again, I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, just to make sure you all follow what I'm saying. I would have just done it, and I would have installed somebody in there. Like, that's a 2 or 3 week renovation. I would have done it. And you all know me well enough by now to know I would have done it without a building permit, without anything else, because I am not going to leave a $700,000 Lamborghini out there without somebody taking care of it. I'm just not. And if the town doesn't like it, sue me. I mean, you are allowed to have a night watchman anywhere, in any building that you own. You owned a 300,000 square foot industrial building. You want to have a night watchman there. You have a 30-story building downtown. You want to have a night watchman there. You do not want to leave, that might be $100 million building, for the teenagers to get loose in the building. Imagine the amount of damage they could do in a weekend in a 30-story building. So I can't coach that, but I said, that's what I would do. And I wouldn't ask anybody's permission because I'm going to protect my asset. So that's what I would do. And I would ask you to consider that yourself. All right, can you see my screen again, Karina? Okay. Now, what are the site superintendent duties? I want you guys to know this because many of you will build all kinds of amazing things, especially since you're much younger than me. Some of you will be working into your 80s and 90s. I'm on the Freedom 95 plan myself. So I have a number of site superintendents who live in buildings that I own, including industrial buildings, and they ensure the building is safe, clean, and presentable. They manage cleaning personnel. They also do tenant relations. They handle any issues by tenants or residents. They can show space or units, space if it's commercial and units if it's residential, to prospective tenants. They're familiar with emergency procedures, and they are the last person out in the case of a crisis. All right, so if there's a fire in your building, my superintendents are told, you're the last person out. You knock on every door. Anybody here? And before you leave, the captain of the ship goes down with the ship. They don't like to hear it, but I said, are we clear on that? And then they do prosaic things like make sure the garbage is put out properly and the grass is cut and that sort of thing. They inspect suites on turnover and recommend scope of work for preparing space or rental or units for new tenants. They monitor, service contracts and warranties. They process maintenance requests. They supervise, appliance repairs and routine plumbing repairs. They supervise general maintenance in common areas. And they ensure all mechanical and exit doors are secure and functioning properly. Every once in a while you read about, a disco. I don't know if they have discos anymore, but nightclubs that are burning and the emergency doors are locked and chained and people die. Right? It's ridiculous, but that's what happens. All right. So how much does a site superintendent cost me? That's the wrong question to ask. All right. The right question is, how do you turn a cost center into a profit center? And here's an example of one of the projects I worked on. This might go back to the 90s, I think. This was Blue Heron Storage, a mini storage business I owned. And you'll notice I built in front of the property a high ranch bungalow. It had the site superintendent or the property manager lived in the upstairs unit with his spouse, and the downstairs unit had its walkout condition. It was rented to a third party. It was a retired couple by the name of Bert Loranger and his wife Lynn Loranger, and they were the sweetest people you could imagine. So I paid them this is a long time ago, it would be more today. I paid them $1,200 a month just to basically sit in their rocking chairs and monitor the place and wave hi. And they paid me $1,200 a month for their space. So effectively, really, it was a very, very low cost. So you can turn cost centers into profit centers. You always have to ask yourself that. And by having Bert and Lynn here in the 12 years that I owned this business, we had zero vandalism, zero graffiti, zero theft. We didn't even bother locking the gates. It was a wonderful experience. Why am I so keen on workshops? You're probably tired of hearing me say it. There's been a gigpreneur explosion, and this happened long before the pandemic hit, but it's just been accelerating. The number of people with side hustles today is out of it's incredible. And I don't know if I showed you this before. Daniel, did I show you this before, what happened in Picton?
It doesn't look familiar.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But Picton is a small town in sort of, I don't know, getting towards southern Ontario. And two of my former architecture students, I just ran into them on the street in Picton, and I was there celebrating the wedding of one of my daughters to a very nice young man. And I just ran into these two young people who are practicing architecture in Picton, and they said, "Are you familiar with what's happening at the Picton Air Base?" I said, "No, I got no idea." So when I had a moment, I went up there. It's up on a plateau, and it's an old Canadian Forces air base, and it had been sold to a Toronto group. And I found all of these old barracks. Can you see them up here? I don't know, there's probably 40 of them. And they had turned them into workshops. So this one was rented to a yoga studio. This one was rented to a woman by the name of Maggie. Maggie gone to pot. That's not marijuana or cannabis. It is pottery. This guy did a World War II museum in here for little kids to come for tours. And there were just so many of these, and this is just a little closer up of the yoga studio. And what was incredible about this is these places didn't have water. They had heat, they had electricity, but they didn't have water. They didn't have toilets. You want a toilet, you put a porta potty outside. They were really, really basic. They're barracks, right? And so when I talked to Sabby and Paul and Patrick, I was really hammering them on the workshop model, which didn't work, but they didn't listen to me. I think I got fired before I got hired. Anyway, so they said, well, Merrickville and Smith Falls, they're too small. I said, well, wait a second. Picton has 4,700 people. Merrickville has 3,100, and Smith Falls, getting on to 10,000. So your market is more than twice the size of Picton. And look what happened with the Picton thing. They purchased, these guys from Toronto purchased 688 acres, including, 40, 50 buildings, for $485,000. Think about that. That's incredible. 41 buildings were usable. There's the number. Anyway, and they just started leasing them. They had heard from me about the workshop model and the success I was having. They attended one of my webinars. They said, well, we're going to try it. And picked it. And they had incredible success. When I was there, I out of those 41 buildings, I don't know if maybe 2 or 3 were empty, but almost none were empty. They weren't really expensive to rent, but there's some big ones and some little ones. And anyway, they were generating. So they bought this thing for $485, put no money into it. It's as is, where is, if you understand that term. And they were generating net operating income of $366,000. It'd be like Dave, you and me buying a $485,000 house and being able to rent it for $366,000 a year after paying everything. if you can find some of those houses, you and I should, we should talk. All right? Okay. So I told them when they called me up and wanted a little bit of advice, I said, I think your place is worth over $4 million just on cash flow. And I said, now you've got this strong cash flow, you can start to do really amazing stuff with it. And here's another one. Some of you may have seen this before. This was the very, very first location where we started with this workshop model. And that's one of the things, Bob, that I wanted to at least you to think about in your, in phase 3, whether you might have some housing and some workshops, right? Because it's a wonderful combination, because a lot of people have these side hustles. And what I'm encouraging some builders to do and land developers to do is to offer, a lot, a house, coach house, an in-home apartment, and maybe a backyard mini office or a backyard workshop as an option, right? As an optional extra. Because I think when people think about their house, they think it's a liability because it takes money out of your jeans. When they think about a backyard mini office where they can, be a coach, or they can run their RMT practice, or a backyard workshop where they can make money, that's the asset. The house might be the liability, and the two together are a tremendous combination. Anyway, here's this warehouse on Aikens Road, and you can see it's literally in the middle of nowhere. It's 8 or 10 minutes from the nearest homes, and it is a substandard warehouse. It's only got, I think, 10-foot ceiling height, and most warehouses you need at least 18 or 20 feet, and some of the larger companies like Amazon and Wayfair want 60 feet or more. So this is substandard for sure. And there's a coverall building here. You can't see it, but in behind there's an old farmhouse and another coverall building on 2 acres. You can see the coverall building a little bit better here, and you can see the farmhouse, a little bit of the farmhouse here. And again, you can't see the coverall in behind, but there's another one there. And then here's about an 18,000 square foot substandard warehouse. And I encourage my clients, Chris and Warren and Mark, to buy this thing. And they said, why would we buy a substandard place that's completely vacant? We'll never be able to fill it up. I said, you can if you do small workshops. And, I can be pretty convincing, not always, but I can be. And they bought it, and they converted it to small workshops. Some of them are like 300 square feet. Some of them are 15 or 1600 square feet. You can see them on the screen here. And it's become an incredibly thriving community. We put in, Chris and Warren and Mark put in, lots of new ingress and egress. This is an overhead garage door. You can see, look at the size of the corridors. They do the walls, they cover it with plywood. Because it's an industrial building, things get knocked around. This is Warren, one of the owners, and it's become a really, really great place to hang out. So this was being sold by Modern Niagara, which is a huge industrial company, and this was one of their assets they really wanted to get rid of. They were asking $990,000 for it. Days on market, when I looked at it, was, I don't know, hundreds of days. It was like, it had been for sale for, I'm going to say 2 years, but it wasn't that long, but it was 600 or 700 days. It had 10-foot ceiling height, which is entirely substandard. It was in the middle of nowhere. Nobody had any idea what to do with it, whereas we did. We thought micro workshops would work. So the boys bought it for $250,000, 2 acres with all those buildings for $250,000. Then they renovated it, spent about $385,000, close to $400,000 on the main building. They did another $200,000 renovating the farmhouse. So their total cost was not negligible. It was about $850,000. But here's what happened on the income side. Now, when you look at cap rates that are 33%, you can stop. You don't need to do an internal rate of return. Okay, Dave? You don't need to know anything about IRR. If you're getting 33% on your cap rate, I mean, I don't know what their internal rate of return is. It might be 50%, 60%. You can just stop calculating. It's the course is called home run. That's a home run that you go around the bases at least twice, maybe 3 times. So it's a fantastic result. And this one is like buying a house, Dave, for $850,000 and being able to rent it for like $23,000 a month. That's fantastic. So this turned an $850,000 investment into something that was recently appraised at $3.5 million, right? But it's worth over $4 million. Appraisers tend to, lag the value a little bit. Just on a cash flow basis, I think they could certainly sell it today for $4 million. That's what a real estate business model can do for you. If you buy a house and you have a 3.5% cap rate or a 4% cap rate, it's going to take you 200 or 300 years to get rich. That's just the way it is. And the answer might be you'll never make it because you'll get tired of reaching in your pocket every month and having to subsidize it, right? But if you can do something like we're talking about here with your real estate, that is a couple of home runs for sure. All right, so let's go back to the Merrickville school. So my client had not done any due diligence. So when I was there, I asked Patrick to get up on this is the architect, to get up on the chair, remove a ceiling tile. We wanted to check whether or not we had a good roof and whether we had fire separation. Because if you're putting a tenant in here and you got a tenant who's a different tenant next to him or her, you want to make sure you have a fire separation, right? And that's safety, all right? In case there's a fire in your workshop, it takes a long time to spread to the next workshop, right? And it turned out they had that. So up here you have a concrete roof, and between, if you can see here, I don't know if it might be too small on your screen, but if you can see here on the right-hand side, there's a block wall, which provides you fire separation. So these were already fire separated. So I was really enthusiastic about turning this building into workshops. The other thing that I like doing is, and this is true for residential buildings, I cannot believe how many apartment buildings are built, and condos as well, where your ground floor units are served by an internal corridor. That makes no sense. Whether it's a house with a micro suite or a basement apartment, a duplex, a triplex, a 35-unit building, a 150-unit building, your ground floor units, every time you give a ground floor unit their own window and door to the outside, you have improved your building. You will rent those units for more money. Like if you're a dad and you have maybe you're single father, a single parent, what's better, being on the 7th floor and having to go down an elevator, or letting your kid run out the front door, so to speak? It's amazing the difference it makes. And even in commercial, same thing. So what I said to Sabby and Patrick and Paul was, this would be very simple to add doors here, so that the workshops facing the main street would have their own ingress and egress. They don't have to share with anyone else. Trust me, that will make them easier to rent, and you'll rent them for more, and people will stay longer. All right, now here's some of the things they didn't do. They did not check the condition of the roof until I was on site. This is after they bought it, and said, could somebody please go up on the roof and check the condition of the roof? They did not check the water. They didn't even bother turning on the tap. I did, and look what came out. They didn't analyze the water. Remember, this is not city water. This is coming from a well. They didn't check whether it's potable water, whether you can drink it and not die, and whether the chemical analysis would show whether it's high in sulfur or salt or iron or some other health parameters, right? This is very important. You don't want to poison people. Anyway, so they didn't do that. As I mentioned earlier, they didn't check the fire separations. And they didn't test the septic field to see if it was still working. If you leave, this school's been vacant for some time, if you leave a septic system non-functional for a couple of years, what happens to the septic system often is it will fail. And think about Canada, how cold it gets. It gets down to minus 20 degrees, maybe minus 30, and you've got water in these septic systems. It freezes, and then it'll buckle, and all of the piping will break, okay? So you cannot leave these buildings unattended. Karina says, listing all the things they did not check makes my heart beat faster. I'm with you on that. I mean, listen, I don't want to be overly critical, but the realtor probably could have been a little bit more on the ball here, okay? But anyway, so the septic system may have failed. And what you want to do is, if you have a septic system and the building is vacant, you want to go there, especially in the winter, and flush all the toilets and run the water, because human beings, when they when they use the facilities, the liquids and other material comes out at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So it warms up the septic bed in the middle of winter, if you sort of follow what I'm saying, or if you're doing a load of washing or something like that. So Dave says, what did they check? I don't think they did much. They didn't test the heating system. Does the heating system work? I mean, holy smokes. And we're, it's September now. It's going to be friggin' cold in Eastern Ontario soon. So they don't even know if the heating system works. So I said, well, maybe you should check that before winter. They didn't test the soils. They have no idea what the soil conditions are. So Savvy wasn't keen on doing that thing that I talked about, which was renovating the principal's office to make it a place for the night watchman, and I believe you can do that, but he just wasn't comfortable doing that. So I said, do what I did at my barn dominium. I rolled this 55-foot container on the site, hooked it up to my septic system and well and electrical system, and presto magic, I've got my site supervisor on site right next to my barn dominium project. You can sort of see the barn in the background here. He wasn't keen on that either. And that's the barn dominium, and you've seen it before. By the way, I don't know if I told you this. Woodpeckers attacked my barn this summer. And I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but these are all kinds of little holes in the wood. And my site supervisor goes out there and throws pebbles at them to scare them away. I said, well, that's really not effective. So I bought him a slingshot. And so I just when I was a kid, I was pretty good at that. So anyway, so I've got a painter going out there next week to patch and paint my poor old barn dominium, because I got like 10 entrepreneurs in there. Here's one of them. This is Abed. He runs Fannin Kitchens. He's a young guy. He's fantastically successful, and this is his workshop. I just wanted to give you a sense of what's going on in my world. Oh, here's the cigar box guy I talked about, Dave. This is his workshop, and then I got a boat builder from France, a really cool guy, Arnaud, and he builds e-boats, electric boats, and there's his workshop. And the water in my property on this particular, in the barn dominium, this is my wife, by the way, is not particularly tasty, and it needs quite a bit of work. So look at the system we put in here to process the water. That's our water system. It's a reverse osmosis system, and I'm not going to tell you how much it costs. $37,000 bucks. But we've got water there. You could make beer or wine with that, or beer, I guess. But I wanted people to have access to good drinking water. We have a little kitchen. You can sort of see a little bit of it here. We've got a washer and dryer in there. Some people want to live in there, and I said, absolutely not. Okay, this is a barn. We've got fire extinguishers everywhere. We've got people doing all kinds of cool stuff there. But if you have somebody living there, there's no fire separations whatsoever. This thing would burn to a cinder in certainly well under an hour, probably half an hour to be on the ground. So nobody lives in there. But I've been asked. All right. So I used, for workshops, I used rates between $2 and $3 per square foot per month gross. That means including everything, plus HST, because commercial rents in Ontario are subject to HST and residential rents are not. These are good numbers, and you're going to see just how good they are in a moment. And this is a friend of mine. His name is Terry Matthews. He's a tech tycoon in Ottawa and in Wales. But today he makes more money in real estate than he does in tech. And he's a huge real estate guy. And a lot of tech guys, men and women, by the time they're 40, they're considered old, they're getting pushed out, and they come to me for coaching, and they decide they're going to invest in real estate. In Terry's case, billions of dollars of real estate. In the case of a typical technology worker, he or she might have 10 units or or something like that. Anyway, so Terry has, for his technology side of things, he has things that are called Terryisms. And like he's like a demigod in his world. And here are the 10 Terryisms. Form an early and lasting attachment to your customer. Follow the fastest, least effort route to revenue. Pursue only those goals that are consistent with overall objectives. Stay team focused. Follow your mentor's advice. And I agree with that. Create a great business first and cool tech second. Keep your costs down. Leverage your investment with other people's money. Follow a global mandate. And not only should you go after every geography, but you should go after every vertical. Well, a lot of those also happen to apply to real estate, and Terry applies them to real estate in a big way. So what I was trying to explain to Savvy and his crew, the fastest, least effort route to revenue is, in my opinion, converting that building to workshops, for sure. And I would defend myself to the bitter end that it's covered under school. And the zoning would be appropriate, in my opinion. Anyway, so here's what my analysis looked at for this building. So it ended up with a cap rate of around 21.6%, and probably the route to revenues is within a year or two, not 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In fact, if I owned that building, within 8 or 10 months, I bet you I'd have the whole building full of entrepreneurs. In Picton, they rented like 30 of them in just a very short period of time, a few months, right? So I was a little bit more conservative, but whether it's again, Dave, whether it's a 21% cap rate or a 30% cap rate, again, you can just stop calculating. Those are wonderful numbers to have. And that's what I think is possible. So I think he could take this $662,000 investment and make it worth, a couple of $1 million, and probably do that within a 2 or 3 years. That's a home run. It may be not those 2 home runs that Aikens Road was, but it's pretty close. All right. And then here's where that number came from. I wanted to compare these two. Sorry, I wanted to compare these two. A cap rate of 18% and an internal rate of return of 21%. I guess I calculated them, or a cap rate of 3.8% and a negative internal rate of return. Well, obviously, Savvy's idea, in my opinion, is likely to be a fail, and this is likely to be a success. And certainly there's a track record there on Aikens Road, the Barn Dominion, Shadi Fahal in Waterloo with his building, and many, many others in the States. I've got a bunch of them doing it. So there's lots of track record that this is a good model. And Steve Jobs is no longer with us, but, Apple's, tagline is think different. Mine is make impossible possible. And Steve's and Apple's was think different. So I want you guys to remember that. I want you to think different about zoning, challenge the conventional ideas, and think about how you're going to fast track revenues for your case studies. How do you do that? All right. So unfortunately, a problem came up, and this is where I want your advice. Houston, we have a problem. That's from Apollo 13. That might be The Simpsons, though. So the realtor didn't tell me this until like 3 weeks into this assignment, that his client bought this property from the school board, and the school board registered a restrictive covenant on title. No schools allowed. Can you read it there? It might be too small. The transferee, that means the buyer, will not erect or use any building or structure on any part of the subject property or any part of the subject property for the purpose of private school as defined in the Education Act. And I said, Paul, you're telling me this now? You allowed your client to purchase a property? Like, think about this building. Let's say you didn't want to do the workshop thing at all. What would be an alternative? Well, I think running a day home here would be, you know, not a preschool, a daycare, right? I mean, trust me, there's lots of people having babies. My daughters are all having kids, my sons too. They need daycare. So, I mean, daycare is, you know, like a Montessori, you know, that's an obvious thing to put there. People will drive 8 or 10 minutes to take their kids to a Montessori school, right? He allowed his client to purchase a building that he can't actually use. I went, holy smokes, thanks for telling me. I hope he never listens, neither Paul or Savvy ever listen to this recording. And I said, what the hell is the definition of a private school? So I got that. A school means a school under the jurisdiction of a board as defined in the Department of Education, and a commercial school or private school means a school conducted for hire gain other than a private academic, religious, or philanthropic school. So, you know, they even exclude like a dance school. I mean, my 3 daughters went to a wonderful dance school called Elite. And, you know, I mean, it just was, you can't have a yoga studio in here. You can't have a, you know, gym. There's a gym there, but you can't have a gym there. Like, it is ridiculous. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing now. So we're in the middle of this debate now. What the hell is Savvy going to do with this building other than maybe give up?
If it was me, I would rent it out as like you know, for the city to, you know, park their dump trucks or just a parking lot, store trucks, storage units.
So storage is not a permitted use. And that's a very good suggestion. Dave, unmute yourself. Don't worry about it. Everybody unmute yourselves so we can all chirp in here and have a little bit more of a free flow. So Dave, yeah, it's not permitted in the zoning. And so somebody, it wasn't me, I think Patrick Rutherford, the architect, said, well, maybe we just, you know, rent it out for storage, or maybe I suggested, I don't remember. And Savvy and his realtor said, oh, it's not in the zoning. So if we rented it out for storage, and then, you know, we get a bylaw officer come along, oh, you can't use it for storage, maybe we have to close it and order everybody out and be in a huge embarrassment.
But you could use it for parking, even if you could use it for storage, and parking is different. So as long as it's in and out.
I don't disagree with you, but again, I think, by the way, I did mention that as well.
Yeah,
definitely mentioned. And again, Savvy said, well, is parking a parking lot a permitted use? And the answer is no. I mean, a paid parking lot, a commercial parking lot, is another defined use. So I like those ideas a lot. And I think that's fine. I mean, if we did the workshop thing and somebody said, look, I just want to use it for storage. Oh, sure, go ahead. I would agree with you 100%. But unfortunately, my client and his realtor did not. All right, who's next?
Could he still do the workshops? Because that's a whole different thing, right? That's not considered a private school.
Well, you see, the workshop is not a specific use in the zoning. Okay, so the way when I looked at the zoning, the way I was going to provide political cover for the workshop use, Karina, was to say that each workshop would in fact be a school. So if it was Dave Lewis, he would say, look, I'm going to make cigar box guitars, and maybe once a year I'll have an open house and I'll teach people something about it. So it would fall under the school, not realizing until like 2 or 3 weeks later when Paul finally disclosed to me this restrictive covenant. So I don't think the workshop idea is going to work.
I would go to the school board and talk to them and say, hey, we're doing these workshops, so this doesn't conflict with your covenant that you have on there, correct? And get them to agree to that in writing and carry on.
Yeah, I like that, Michael. Thank you for that. That I think is a viable solution. I might take it a step further. I would ask them to release the restrictive covenant as it relates to workshop and workshop school. Like, it makes so much sense. I mean, in what way is that a competition for the school board? I mean, you know, if Dave Lewis is teaching people how to make cigar box guitars, that's something the school board is never going to do, not in 10,000 years. So I like that idea, and I think that is a good suggestion. Okay, who's next?
Bruce, did it have any type of a commercial designation? Or,
It did. Sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah.
to cut you off, but yes, it did. It had as accessory use all kinds of cool things like store and for example, I thought another good use of it would be sort of maybe a spa use in a health center, right? I mean, people will drive 8 minutes to get a massage. They'll drive 8 minutes if they can see a physiotherapist. They'll drive 8 minutes if you need a new set of glasses. So I thought yes, there are some commercial uses, but they have to be accessory to the main use, which is for example, a school, which is not allowed.
Not
So
allowed.
I like that idea too. I do. It just
Yeah.
sorry, you go ahead, Bob.
yeah, so that was the idea, some type of a commercial idea. I like the one that was floated, that you could use some kind of professional or maybe some kind of a commercial. And also, is there any possibility for industrial, like I'm talking about like a building a large company manufacturing that does something, and you'd have to find an appropriate client and do some custom work, but could it be used as a manufacturing kind of a place?
Probably not with that zoning.
Not with that zoning, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the building is a terrific building, 17,000 square feet. It'd be a shame
Yeah.
to let it just sit there and have the teenagers, by the way, if Savvy doesn't do something, the teenagers will destroy that building this winter. Come the spring, they'll
100%.
have to pull the building down. The septic won't work, the pipes will all freeze. I mean, it's, again, if you owned a Lamborghini, Bob, you'd be out there polishing it every weekend. If you owned a dog, you'd take the dog for a walk an hour and a half a day. You wouldn't leave your $700,000 investment to degrade to nothing. But that's
What if,
the direction it's headed.
So what if they went back to the lawyers and this is technically a covenant that should have been deleted as part of the sale,
100%.
right? And then also like the covenant is really only enforceable or only if the school board is going to enforce that covenant can they go back. So maybe there's talking to somebody in the school board and say, are you guys intending to enforce this covenant? Because some of them are so old, these covenants, that
Yeah.
they should have expired or should have happened as part of the sale or were deleted as part of the sale. So maybe going back to the lawyers and say, look, this was something that was missed
I think
as
you're
part
right.
of the transaction, and then this covenant should have been deleted, but we didn't catch it.
I think that's right, and you're on the same track as Michael. I think you're right, and Karina, there's a thing called I'm not a lawyer, like I'm just an engineer, but if you have a transaction that's completed and it's between two parties who have vastly different, power, if you will. Often the courts will look at that and change it. Okay, so for example, if typically in the past, if a woman signed a prenuptial agreement with a man who was very wealthy and she was not, maybe she would argue, if the marriage doesn't work out, that she was kind of forced into it. She didn't really understand what she was signing. I think something tells me that if the school board said, to hell with you, go take a long walk off a short pier, we're not changing anything. You bought it, too bad, so sad. I would sue them. And I would say to the court that this is so disproportionately unfair. And so, you see, Karina, I do know this about the law, that you have to be able to show damages. And if you were to bring Dave Lewis, who's a super sweet old man, I got to be careful because I'm getting there too, but you bring him into a courtroom and he says, yeah, I'm going to rent a place here and I'm going to teach people how to make cigar box guitars, and I don't think the school board would ever do that. The school board cannot demonstrate that they're damaged in any way by what you and Michael have been saying. Does that make sense? So I think you have a strong legal argument, and eventually I think the school board would crater. And the way that I would make sure that they buckle under is litigations tend to become public, right?
Mhm.
And one thing that school board trustees hate is bad press. They don't like that. Alex, when I was at Carleton University teaching in the School of Architecture, you remember?
Yep.
Back in the day, the president of the university canceled Cosmic. You remember Cosmic?
Oh, I remember very well.
Yeah, I
It's a great
remember
party.
Cosmic. Yeah.
You know it too, Dave?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cosmic was an event that the School of Architecture would put on once a year. And the third year students, I think it was third years, would change the school into these phantasms, fantastical things, and they would have music, and they would have all kinds of wonderful presentations going on, and fun. And I was much younger than I would go to them as well, and they would go on, and it was just an amazing party and an amazing event. It was so fantastic that David Letterman came, or a camera crew from the Letterman show came, and they did an interview one year. Did you know that, Alex?
No, I didn't know about
Dave?
Letterman.
No, I didn't
guys-
know that.
You guys are too young. But back in the day, David Letterman was a big thing back then.
Yeah.
Kind of right on the par with Saturday Night Live. And so Cosmic was on the Letterman show. And so what happened was one year, some people who were not students came and disrupted the event. And they started to get into fights, and maybe they were doing some drugs or alcohol or both. And there was a problem. And so the president said, no more, that's it for Cosmic. And so the students came to me, and they were distraught the next year, and they thought maybe I could help, because I'm a child of the 60s and I went to school in California, so I might know something about street protest. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll tell you how to get Cosmic back on track. You call up the president's office and you say, by the way, 350 architecture students are going to occupy the president's office this afternoon. We're calling all the local radio stations and newspapers and television stations, and we're not going to accept that Cosmic is at an end. We will put in place, appropriate policing. We'll put a budget in there to make sure that it doesn't happen again. They didn't burn the university down. I mean, they broke a few windows and stuff.
You can't burn that building down. It's concrete.
It would be tough, right? I mean, it looks like all buildings can burn after the World Trade Center towers came down, but short of a 747 full of kerosene flying into it, probably you couldn't take it down.
Yeah.
So I said, I don't think it'd be very long before the Cosmic will get the green light again. And in fact, they didn't even have to occupy, just the threat of occupation. By the afternoon, the president called a meeting with the head of the student group, and it was sorted out within like 48 hours. Probably took 24 hours. So I if I had a client who was a little bit more willing, as I said, I think I got fired before I got hired. We would take this with the school board, and I don't think it would require litigation. We would just say, look, we don't think it's fair. We're gonna litigate the matter, and we're gonna make sure that all the local newspapers and local politicians and others know that you're standing in the way of people who need jobs, and we're not going to accept that. So I think you're on the right track, Karina, and you too, Michael. All right, anybody else?
Yeah, question. So there's a gym there. I was wondering if that could be used for sports or events. Maybe that's not very profitable though, with the area.
Well, I would certainly, I think it would be very profitable, Daniel. I think that's a very good idea. I think it would make an excellent gym that you could rent by the hour.
Yeah,
So-
I'm thinking leagues and so on might be
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah,
Could be
I
more of an
actually,
evening thing though.
Yeah.
Or
I have a
offices might want to
suggestion
meet there.
as well.
I like that. That's a really good idea. Sorry, David?
I think that area would be perfect for a recreational facility, which is part of the things there. You could turn it into a sports complex.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
so
Oh, I like
basically,
that.
oh yeah. So like we have a shortage of domes in this area. That would be the perfect spot. It's in between two cities, perfect for tournaments. You can set up fields there. You could rent the fields out by the hour, split them into like quarters.
Could you do events there as well?
Everything.
Sorry, like
Yeah.
could you do like not like some other community events and
Anything.
so on?
You can
in the
even
room,
have a golf school. We can have The Bruce Firestone Golf
Instead
School.
school.
Okay.
I hate golf.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing I can do. I play mini golf.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, that
Oh,
idea
that's
would
a
work
hell
here.
of an idea. Oh, I really like that. I just got literally, Dave. I got like if I had any hair, it'd be standing up.
Yeah.
So
I gotta show
the
you
workshops, yeah,
Sorry,
can
go
you
ahead.
also use this for, could they also be used for offices? Like, I don't know if there's any technical, like technology people that could make use of these
Yeah,
spaces, or is that
100%.
included in the workspace idea?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I know would work is that a lot of the technology people like to form little skunk works. Skunk works is a term
Yeah.
that comes from Apple. Like Steve Jobs, when he was developing the first Macintosh, he took a small group of engineers. They went off-site somewhere, and they didn't come back until they designed their first Mac. I love these ideas. Hang on, I got to show you something that I'm working on. The Dave, that you'll like this if I can find it. Just give me a second here. I don't know, it might take me too long to find it, and I don't want to waste your time, but let's see, maybe it's here. Oh, yeah,
I was gonna say,
got it. Hang on.
can you put a grow up in there? They have one of those in Smith Falls, I guess.
I was thinking that too, actually.
Yeah,
They
no,
have
I'm not,
the old chocolate factory.
no, I'm not interested in that. So
No,
yeah,
I'm not really into that stuff either.
It's a sector on the verge of complete bankruptcy in this country. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I'm with
Yeah.
you on that. I just, like, I think you guys,
I appreciate there's a guy who owns the ripening, the tomato place, the greenhouse tomato.
Suntech.
Yeah, and they wanted to buy him out, and he said, no, I'm keeping my tomatoes. He was actually probably very smart in retrospect. It's a better, more lucrative crop than weed right now.
100%. I
Very
mean,
nice, yeah.
if you want to get anywhere in life, if you want to be successful in life, and you cannot combine, drinking and thinking, weed and look, with all due respect, look, I don't care. I mean, if you want to lie on the beach and drink beer and smoke weed, that's your choice. But if you want to do the stuff that we're talking about doing, they're not compatible. Listen, this is something I'm working on with a group out of France right now. They're very, very successful. They have a sports academy. So Dave, this is,
Wow.
I love that idea. So they run one of the largest sports academies in the world, just about 30 minutes outside of Nice on the Riviera. And by the way, I'm doing some coaching and consulting with them. And I said, one of the things I'm putting in my contract is a trip to Nice, right?
Sure.
Oh, that's a beautiful place. So what we're looking at for a site right now is to do this. I don't know, can you see it okay, Dave?
Oh yeah, that's
Tennis
pretty
court.
much kind of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Exactly.
Exactly. So that gym would be, this is pickleball. Do you guys know pickleball?
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. It's very popular.
It's huge.
Ever since the NBA lockout, it's been even more popular.
Yeah, you bet. So this is an arena on the super cheap. This is basically a coverall building with, you can see that they've got grandstands here, but the grandstands are just, these are super cheap. They're to buy. I mean, I know they're really inexpensive. They're just metal.
They look like portables.
You've got your, this was the US Open Championship. Where was it? I don't know. I don't know where it was, but it was somewhere in the States. And they want to build a series of these across Canada and in the States. But Canada's their target right now because we're quite far behind where America's at. So as soon as you said an event center, I thought of that because you got the 9 acres at the back.
Yeah, that's exactly. Like, honestly, this is something that we had always talked about doing. And 9 acres, that's more than enough to do a sports complex, have some auxiliary fields on the outside.
How many soccer fields could you put there?
Whoa, jeez. You could put a whole complex. So you could probably put at least 10.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you the place in just give me a second here. I'll show you the place in Nice. Give me one sec. So that's a really good idea. So this is, I'll just pan out a little bit here. So this is, so here's Nice.
Right.
And, I'll just go way out here so you can see it a little bit better. So you're right on the Riviera, right? And, there's sunny Italy and there's, I guess, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, Greece.
And here's the academy.
Oh, wow.
Dave, guess how many acres that is?
Probably 7.
Well, that's a very good guess. It's 13. So 9 acres is, you know, it's kind of like 85% or 80% of that.
Yeah, and that's huge.
Hmm.
Wow. That's an academy.
That's an academy. Well, they have, you can see they have housing here. So
Yeah.
and the guy, Patrick, who runs this, Mortag, I can't really say his name very properly, Murat Toglu. Patrick is Selena Williams. What's her first name?
Serena.
Serena
Yeah.
Williams. You know, he's like one of the top tennis coaches in the world. Serena.
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 Williams. Yeah.
I'm getting old. Serena
That's okay.
Williams. He coaches Serena Williams and you know, elite tennis players. So people who come here and they study for high school, and so they can live here in residence, and then they can go to school, and then they can practice. So this is tennis focused, but they understand that in Canada, tennis is not enough. It's going to be tennis and pickleball.
Huh.
Right. So those are really great ideas. Oh, I'm glad you chirped in. I can tell I got smart people here. Anybody else before we move on? That was fantastic, you guys. And I'm going to update the slide deck afterwards, Dave. I'm going to start to put in some of this idea. And Michael and Karine, I'm also going to put in the litigation idea. I think that's terrific. Hopefully not litigation. Hopefully just get the lawyers to agree. This is kind of like usury, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it's kind of weird, Bruce, that a clause like that wouldn't have been pointed out by the lawyer. You know, during the negotiation.
Yeah.
This should have been found out. This is not a small thing.
Had it
It
been a
basically says you
lawyer
can't
that
use the building.
very detailed, that lawyer
Yeah.
should have caught it. We actually had one like that very
Yeah.
recent. Our
Yeah, we did.
lawyer caught it where it had said the lots can must be minimum of 1 acre. And our lawyer is very like detailed. He saw that
Yeah, good for him.
and he had that deleted before closing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I worked for Brazil, which is a large developer in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. I worked with Brazil, and they bought a retirement residence that had been abandoned by a large retirement residence group. I helped with that transaction, and the sellers wanted a restrictive covenant, which was similar in this sense, that it couldn't be used for a retirement residence. And so I asked the agent for the seller, I said, because Brazil is headquartered in Quebec, can we submit the agreement of purchase and sale in French? And he said, sure. I mean, French is a legal language in Ontario. So I said, great. So we did the agreement of purchase and sale, Karina and Dave, en français.
Yeah.
And guess what we left out, Karina? I'll let you guess.
That covenant.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they closed on the deal, and then about 2 weeks later, I get this horrible, nasty call. I mean, screaming at me by the commercial realtor. Said, I won't tell you what he said to me, but you know, basically, lots of 4-letter words. You swindler. You know, you dropped the clause out. I said, well, yeah, we didn't think that was right, but we submitted it in writing to you. Well, it was in French. We couldn't read it. I said, well,
Not my problem.
Get a French lawyer. I mean, next time. Well, we're going to sue you. I said, good luck with that.
Yeah.
French is a legal language, and that's it. And I'm getting off the phone. I started to get mad because I don't think people should be abusive on the phone, you know, or in person. I'm anti-violence of any sort. And certainly I wouldn't have done that. I might be mad, but I'm not going to swear at people and abuse them. But I said, look, good luck with that. But no, we're not. Well, there's no restrictive covenant, and there's not going to be. And anyway, Brazil's done very well with that building.
Yeah, I guess so.
They bought it for, Karina, they bought it, and Dave, they bought it for $2.5 million. I renovated it and put in about another 3 or 3.5 million. And within a year and a half, it was worth valued at $11.5 million. So that was a real home run for them. So it was fantastic. And I don't know what it'd be worth today, but a hell of a lot more. So it was a home run. But to hell with the restrictive covenants. And you know, the realtor accused me of tricking him by putting it in French. I said, I asked your permission. And I have that, by the way, I have it in an email, because, you ask on the phone, then you email somebody, are you sure it's okay? Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. And I would just add one last piece is that I don't know if that realtor knew of that covenant before or
He
not,
did.
or he had,
He did.
and that's against their code.
Code.
He's supposed to
Yeah,
disclose all of that information, so that's
Yeah,
what.
I was very disappointed, and it took, I think, 3 weeks before he disclosed it to me. I mean, Savvy he did actually hire me and pay me, for my coaching and consulting. And I went down the path, and then I found out, whoa, wait a second, you just cut my knees off. Why didn't you tell me that 3 weeks ago? Well, he eventually did tell me, but I guess, it is what it is. But I'm with you on that, Karina, that he should have been more careful, and the lawyer certainly should have been more careful.
100%.
All
That's
right.
why it always surprises me when people still just take the lawyers or the realtor's info
Word for
and
it.
not do their own due diligence.
You know what? That is completely correct. And I work as well, Karina, with a very, very good youngish lawyer who's extremely thorough. Something, I work with a number of Asian clients as well, and they drive me crazy with questions and due diligence. And my wife is the same. She's a Scottish Irish girl, but she drives me crazy with questions, drilling down and drilling down and drilling down. And my Asian clients do exactly the same thing. But I've learned from listening to my wife now for 38 years, and also dealing with many clients from different parts of Asia, how careful they are, and how they ask and they go over things over and over and over again. And sure enough, ideas come up, and problems come up, and solutions come up. So I've learned to be more careful. As a younger person, I would have been, Mr. I know it all, but not anymore. All right, so I think you're all on the right track. All right, we'll get through a few more things before.
Can I ask one quick question, Mike? How common is this that these clauses or restrictions are inserted into these commercial sales? Like,
It's more common than you might think. Basically, it's anti-competitive if you think about it. The retirement residence people didn't want somebody else to come along and make the building that they had failed with a success, which Brazil did. And in the case of the school board, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're worried that a Montessori school is going to put the Ottawa school board or the local school board out of business. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's anti-competitive, but it's very common. Let's say you had a building and you ran your insurance brokerage out of it. You might decide to sell that when you retire, Alex. And you might say, well, whoever buys this building, they can run any kind of business in there except an insurance brokerage. Like, duh. I mean, well, the reason they don't want that is they'll sell the insurance business to somebody who takes it offsite, but everybody thinks of that building as the place you go for insurance. Right, so there's some branding and that has gone on for maybe decades, and you don't want that brand to go with the building. You want it to go with the sale of your client. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
yeah.
So it's anti-competitive, and I don't, I completely disagree with it. And certainly, had I been the realtor or even a coach in advance, I would never have bought this building with that. I would just say, excuse my language, but you effing keep it. You keep the friggin' thing. I'm still mad about it, but anyway. All right, let's get. We're almost done on this, and thanks for those were really good ideas. And I'm going to update the. So there is another possibility though. So I actually like some of the ideas I got from you guys. So thanks for the free coaching, by the way. But there is another possibility. That has come up. Oh, by the way, this is the building. This is the retirement residence that I helped Brazil buy. It was in my slide deck. I've forgotten. And they renovated, and it's been a huge success. And it's used for the Inuit people. It's here in Ottawa, but it's used for Inuit people coming from the north, right, who need some help. And it's been a huge success. But there is something that I didn't know. There's a lot of stuff I don't know, and this is certainly something I had never heard of. Has anybody on the call heard of MZO, Minister's Zoning Order? Has anybody heard of that? Bob, have you heard of it?
Yeah, they actually did use this in the township of McNabb Braeside for obtaining special authorization for an industrial area. And it was just very complicated for them to do the changing of the zoning. And because this was going to be a benefit, economic benefit to the township, they went through this MZO order and were actually able to obtain it and rezone the land very quickly so
Yep.
that they would be able to land this manufacturing facility.
So I did not know that this existed, and I wish I had known this. But you're exactly right, Bob. An order from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing can cut through the entire planning process. Site plan, sorry, not site plan, zoning, official plan amendment, all the studies, everything else. He or she, whoever's the minister, can issue an order, and that's it. You build it. Like, you literally go out the next day and build it. It's very powerful. It turns out that the MPP for this location in Merrickville is Steve Clark, who happens to be the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So one of the options, I think, for Sabby and his group would be to get to go meet with the Honorable Steve Clark and say, this is an important new initiative. We're going to do some affordable housing, or we're going to do some workshops, or we're going to do whatever, maybe an event center like Dave was talking about. Find out what you're going to do with this property, and then go to Steve and say, we need an MZO. And I suspect they might get it. It's his riding. He is the minister. Makes sense. So I'm embarrassed to tell you, Bob, I didn't know about this, but now that I've seen it, I think you'll see what I said here. I was in touch with a planner this morning. This is a planner I'm working with on a number of projects. And I wrote to him this morning. This is just an email I wrote this morning. I think 10, I don't know how many is
Trillion.
10 trillion projects in North America should go the MZO route, whether it's a ministerial zoning order or it's some equivalent process maybe in the States, I don't know. Including, that 542 square foot bunkie I wanted to build next to my barndominium in Dunrobin. I'm serious. I'm going to talk. I'm going down to Brockville to meet with the minister on the Merrickville property, but I'm going to bring up my friggin' daughter's bunkie that got squashed by the city. And I wanted to show you this. This is a little bit of research done by the University of Chicago some years ago now, and it said that if the zoning rules in 2009 had been the same as 1964, as permissible, as permeable as they had been, in 1964, the U.S. economy would be some enormous number. I thought it was on here, some enormous number bigger, like 35 or 40% bigger. Think about that. And I actually worked it out. For a family of four, the average family of four in the United States would be $85,000 or $86,000 a year better off if the zoning rules had not been as repressive as they have become. In other words, you've heard me say it before, and I'm going to say it again. If you really want my advice, every municipality and town and township and county and city, burn your zoning codes. Take them out, probably 50,000 pages, and burn them and start over. It's killing our economy. Yeah, that's enough. All right.
Bruce?
Yes.
Just want to mention, I got to step away now. I've got a appointment with the inspector at 1 o'clock, but I really enjoyed this session.
Well,
Thanks
thank you
so
very
much.
much, Bob, for that. Good luck, and let me know how it's going.
Very good.
I'll see. We're
Bye, Bob.
almost wrapped up here. So this is something that I just got as well from my planner this morning that Brampton has been using ministerial orders right, left, and center. Here we have, there's just an article on a newspaper, and a lot of the planners and the consultants, they hate this because it means less work for them. But from a point of view of untangling the mess that we have made with our zoning rules, not just in terms of having developments that make sense go forward without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars, and years of studies that nobody actually ever reads. It's not just that. It takes away from people like Alex here, who's a design genius. You'll see it, hopefully in November. It takes away from people like Alex the ability to let his mind create these fabulous things. Or Dave, as he suggested, this event center, which is a fantastic idea. People will travel an hour to go to a pickleball tournament or a championship tennis match. Not a problem. And Merrickville's not that far away. So anyway, so Dave, I was thinking the future use of the 9 acres would be more workshops, or maybe a tiny house town, and maybe some more, maybe a live work condition. But now I'm thinking you are on the right track, that it might be a great recreation center and event center. So I'll add that to my slide deck. One of the things I do on a lot of the properties that I buy is I dig ponds. I think I've told you that before. But these are just a few of the ponds I've dug. Some of them are quite big and some of them are small. But they're very, very cost effective, and you can create your own waterfront if you have the right subsurface conditions. And I know how to test for that. You can reach out to me if you're interested to hear more. I'm not a libertarian, but I do believe in doing the right thing. And I also believe in the right to engage in civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is something that has a long and distinguished history. I think it goes back hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, but certainly hundreds of years. And Mahatma Gandhi, when he was leading the independence movement in India, when they were trying to get their independence from Britain, was asked, how the hell do you fight a modern army like the British Army, which is huge and vast? Are you going to get weapons? Where are you going to get the weapons from? How many people do you expect to die in this revolution? He said, none. He said, well, how's that possible? Well, he said, we're not going to buy any weapons. We're simply going to engage in civil disobedience. And what he meant by that is that the Indian folks would stop serving their masters. They would just stop cleaning the toilets and stop cooking their food and looking after their children and sweeping the roads and working as laborers. They would just stop and they would sit, and they did. And it wasn't very long before they kicked the British out without firing a shot. And I believe in civil disobedience. And again, I can't coach you on that, but I have engaged in it. And Henry David Thoreau, who's a very well-known philosopher from the 19th century, wrote this in 1849. Yeah, civil disobedience is also called passive resistance, the refusal to obey the demands or commands of a government or occupying power without resorting to violence or active measures of opposition. Its usual purpose is to force concessions. Civil disobedience has been a major tactic and philosophy of nationalist movements in Africa and India and elsewhere. And I believe in that. And going back to the story I told earlier about Cosmic, it wasn't to go and bash the president of the university over the head. It was to go and occupy his office peacefully and say, we're here in protest at taking away something that's been going on for years. And in fact, we even called David Letterman for help on that issue. I don't know if you ever heard that story, but it is true. And he offered to mention it on his show. It didn't take long, as I said, for the president to stop. Here's a book that I for those of you who are interested in these kinds of topics, here's a book that is really worth reading. It's called Home from Nowhere. It's written by James Howard Kunstler, who is a very funny guy, and he's not a planner. He's not an urban designer. He's not an architect. He's a journalist. but he writes about urban issues in a way that is very telling. This is probably now 15 years old, this book, but it's still worthwhile. And I just pulled one quote out. The model of the human habitat dictated by zoning is a formless, soulless, centerless, demoralizing mess. It bankrupts families and townships. And I would add, it bankrupts families, townships, and countries. It disables whole classes of decent, normal citizens. By that he means, for example, every trip in most of the suburbs that are being built in Canada and the United States is a car trip. If you're a young person without a car, or an older person without a car, or a poorer person without a car, you can't live in any of these places. It disables whole classes of decent, normal citizens. It ruins the air we breathe. By that he means every trip is a car trip. It corrupts and deadens our spirit. So I'm asking each of you, as I do everybody I coach, to, join in a campaign, to your own personal campaign, to work within, the civil disobedience sort of a capsule in a nonviolent way, but to oppose stupid zoning rules that are ruining our economy and our society. I think you all have a link to this. This is my latest learning outcome novel, Twilight Zone. I'd like you to read it. I know you guys are busy, but I'd like you to read it because it talks about a young man. You see him here on the screen. His name is Virgil, who comes to a small town in Idaho with his daughter, and they rebuilt. It's his arrival in that town, which is called East Dubois in Idaho. They rebuild that town. It's a town, as I've said before in this class, that's completely devastated. It looks like Detroit on a bad day in the 1980s or 90s. And I think you'll see a lot of the concepts that we've been talking about in this class. It does a hell of a lot of real estate, talks a lot about real estate. You'll learn a lot about real estate, but you'll also learn a lot about how I agree with James Howard Kunstler. And he is the man who first said, burn your zoning codes if you want to improve your city or town, your province, your state. And I agree with him. And the Twilight Zone is that again. Something else too that I wanted to leave you with, somebody here on this call or somebody else that I'm coaching or teaching is going to do something in terms of creating a tiny house town. I was hoping that Bob Walkno in phase 3 would consider it. I don't think he wants to do that. Most developers, as you guys already know, want to cater to, rich people with money. They want the big houses and, the fancy cars and all the rest of it, which, that's a market. It makes sense to go after that. And I'm not sure I'll ever convince Bob to look at a different type of phase 3 development. But one of the things that somebody should do, in my opinion, and if I were younger, I think I'd do it, is develop a subdivision. And Karina, I think I've talked to you about it, and Dave. Somebody should do a tiny house town. I tried to get Paul Murphy, as I explained to you earlier, who owns a couple of thousand acres in Calabogie Peaks, to do it. And he and his team want to go after that, the elite level, wealthy people who like skiing and golf and all that stuff. But I can tell you, because I'm very close to the tiny house movement in Canada and the United States, headquartered as it is in Colorado. I do some coaching there and I have clients there. I'm telling you, if somebody would build a subdivision for tiny homes with workshops, so you have this live work condition, the asset and the liability thing, I think it would be huge. My wife and I watched a series, it's an old series from the BBC called From Larkrise to Candleford. And one day, it's just a nice, nothing bad ever happens, right? I don't watch movies where there's car chases and bombs and murders, and that's not interesting to me. Yeah, I know a lot of people like those superhero movies. I do not. But so we watched this BBC thing, and one day we were watching this, and I jumped up. And I went, what's the matter? And I said, wait, I got to get my phone. So I brought my phone and I took this picture from my television screen. This is the poor village is Larkrise. Larkrise is a poor village. Candleford is a little bit more prosperous. And they're about 8 miles apart. But here, this picture from the television shows a little village called Larkroise, which is really tiny house town. And I realized, and I said to my wife, we couldn't build that today. And that's because of the preference of developers to go after only one market, the elite market, and the planning rules are so onerous that you couldn't actually do it. But if we could get a tiny house town approved with 300 tiny house sites and lots of workshops so that people have work to do and employment generating, it would be a huge hit. And one last thing I'm going to leave you with. What I can't explain to Bob or to Paul or pretty much anybody else is I think that is actually more profitable than going after the rich dude. It costs money to build these big lots with pipe services or electric and internet and all the other stuff there. These are big lots and big houses, and they cost money, and they're terrible for the environment. They call them McMansions, right? So the model for the tiny house town is far more profitable for the developer. I swear to God, and I bet you I could prove it to you. I'll try in 2 minutes. All right, so just bear with me. That's why I was trying to get you, David and Karina, to think about it, and I've tried to get Bob to think about it, Paul, and probably 100 others. So far, I'm batting 0-0-0. I'm not quite on Vladdy's level yet, or that fellow who hit 61 home runs this year for the Yankees. Who was that?
Aaron Judge.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm like zeros. But hear me out for a moment. There's a group out there called Park Ridge, and they had 3 cottage parks about 25 years ago, and now they're, I think, at 120. That's in Canada. That's a fast growth. Canada is not an economy on the scale of the United States. No one is. But to go from 3 locations to 120 in 25 years is good growth in a small country like Canada. And the way they did it, and the way I would do a tiny house community, is I would use the Park Ridge model, which is the most profitable business model I've seen, or one of the most. I don't know what the cap rate is, Dave, on that, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's even more than 30%. But it's huge. So here's what Park Ridge does. It's very simple. They buy, say, an existing campground, and they expand it, or an existing trailer park, or whatever. And or they buy a piece of land and start from scratch. But mostly they start with an existing campground. And you can buy lots of campgrounds now because there's lots of people my age and older selling them. So they buy an existing campground and they convert it to a tiny house town or a Park Ridge community called a cottage park. And it costs them about $30,000 or $40,000 to service each one of these sites for these small modular homes. Could be tiny houses or small modular homes. It costs them about $30,000 or $40,000. But what they do is they sell to the consumer, to the resident, a modular home, and they're quite nice. And so you might buy it for $130,000 or $140,000, and then you can plunk it on one of their sites. So you own this modular home or tiny house, and you put it on the site. What Park Ridge tries to do is they try to make $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 on the sale of the home. You can't bring your own; you have to buy one of theirs, and they're quite nice. So if you think about it, if you can make, if it costs you $30,000 or $40,000 to service a lot, and you make $30,000 or $40,000 from the house that goes on it, your cost for that lot is $0. Now, what happens now is the owner of that house is renting, is doing a land lease, is renting that land from Park Ridge. And it used to be, not that long ago, that you could rent one of these sites for about $650 a month plus your utilities. Okay. What do you think they're charging now for a site in BC a month?
$3,500.
That's a good guess in a way. I couldn't believe it. They're getting $1,600 a month for one of these, plus the utilities, and that they charge on top of that. Because Canada and the United States, and not just Canada and the United States, Sweden, European Union, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, have completely failed to provide our people with affordable housing. So Park Ridge or a cottage park operator can get $1,600 a month. So let's just do some quick numbers. Let's say you had, Karina, you and Dave had 100 lots for tiny homes. And you know, BC numbers may be too high. You had 100 and you decide you're going to charge $1,000 a month for your land rent. That's $100,000 a month in cash flow to you, right? On a cost base of zero. Do you understand that? So what is your internal rate? What is your rate of return? Unmute yourself, you guys.
100%.
How much?
100%.
Dave, what do you think?
What's that have?
You're
120%.
making $100,000 a
Yeah.
month,
Yeah.
and your cost base is zero. What's your return on investment?
You said 100,000 a month?
Mm-hmm. And your costs are nothing, zero.
100,000 times return.
So the actual
Indefinite.
percent, thank you. Your return on investment is infinite.
Yeah.
Infinite. Indefinite.
So let's think about the developer. The developer comes in, and instead of having 100 lots, Karina and Dave, the developer has 50, because you know they're big lots and big
Right.
houses. And then he puts all the services in, or she puts all the services in, and they sell those lots to builders who build a big house on it. How much continuing recurring revenues does the developer get from that development over the next 20 years?
They only get
Zero.
Zero.
the one sale.
Which model is better?
The infinite return.
Infinite return.
And the holy
Beast
grail of
model.
business, Alex would know this and Daniel would know it, whether it's technology or real estate, the holy grail of every business, including my business, my coaching practice, is committed monthly recurring revenues, CMRR. I'm sorry I went over time, guys, but CMRR is the holy grail of business. And for a developer, once Bob has finished selling all of his lots, he's got to go and, like Aaron Judge, next year Aaron's going to start just like me at 0, 0, 0.
Zero. Yeah.
Whereas Parkbridge had 3 of these places, and they said, "Oh, wait a second, I got an infinite return here. I have an ATM, which I can go to every month and extract $100,000 of cash, you know, falling out of the friggin' ATM. And here's the great news: I don't have to put the cash in the first place; it just keeps spitting out." And they went from 3 cottage parks to 120. That's why I wanted Karina, you and Dave to think different, like Steve Jobs.
You just blew my mind right now.
Yeah. Mine too.
I'm like,
I love you guys. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't have everybody today, but thanks for sticking with me for 5 minutes of overtime. I really look forward to next month when I get to see everybody one-on-one. See ya.
All right.
well,
Thanks,
thanks for
Bridget.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.